the things that are outside of the system that, represent a form of money that the system can't mess with, Bitcoin and gold, have skyrocketed. I mean, since 2020, in bond terms, gold's up, 250%, and Bitcoin's up, 2,000%. I mean, it's insane. And so that's a signal that something is going on here. And I think we're all going to be stunned. I mean, I know as in the fund I manage, the things I watch, it's very easy to think, well, gosh, this has gone up a lot. And usually when you're investing and you have something that goes up a lot, you think maybe it's time to sell. I think Bitcoin's going to 1 million. I mean, and that's not that far out. I mean, within a 5 to 6 to 7 year window.
Once dismissed as a fringe idea, Bitcoin is now challenging the foundations of global finance, and its next breakout could rewrite the rules of money. Lawrence Lepard, a seasoned investment manager, continues to highlight Bitcoin's unique role in reshaping global finance. With Bitcoin currently hovering near $115,625, traders are closely watching the key resistance zone between $122,000 and $123,700. A decisive break above could propel the price toward $130,000, underscoring the growing momentum behind the world's leading digital asset. Lepard argues that human awareness evolves in waves. What once seems radical eventually becomes mainstream. Just as Galileo was once ridiculed for claiming the Earth revolved around the sun, Bitcoin is transitioning from skepticism to broader acceptance as a superior form of money. He points to the structural flaws of fiat currency, where governments are trapped in an endless cycle of spending and debt creation, weakening the foundation of the financial system. Since 2020, long bonds have collapsed, while gold has surged 250% and Bitcoin nearly 2,000% in bond terms, signaling a shift of confidence into assets immune to manipulation. Despite this, Lepard stresses that Bitcoin adoption is still in its infancy, perhaps only 5%, with exponential growth ahead over the next decade. With its fixed supply of 21 million coins, Bitcoin represents something no form of money has ever achieved: absolute scarcity. For Lepard, this scarcity underpins his bold forecast: gold at $10,000 and Bitcoin at $1 million within the next 5 to 7 years. Don't miss the next big Bitcoin rally. Hit subscribe and turn on notifications to stay ahead of every market-moving shift.
I think it's both, and it comes in a lot of layers, right? Look, human awareness, kind of moves in waves, and, what starts off as kind of a crazy-ass idea eventually becomes common sense accepted reality. I mean, Galileo says, no, we're all circling the sun, and everyone thinks he's a friggin' nut, and the Catholic Church wants to kill him, and, hundreds of years later, it's obvious that's the way it works. And I think the same is going on with respect to fiat money, and so, what you can see is that the central banks have figured it out. Large hedge funds have figured it out. BlackRock has figured it out. Ray Dalio, the largest hedge fund manager, very successful man, he's figured it out. And so, what Lynn describes as nothing stops this train, and what we've seen in terms of the behavior of the government and the trend in behavior of the government, is that they just cannot and will not stop spending. The system is constructed in a manner which forces them to spend, to keep it going, and to buy votes at an ever-increasing rate. And so it's like an alcoholic has to keep drinking more, or a drug addict, you have to take more and more and more to get the high. Well, eventually you kill yourself. And that's what's happening with the system. It's eventually going to kill itself. And it's showing up most notably in the obligations, the trusted obligations of the system. Long bonds, which used to be the base of the financial system, have gotten destroyed, particularly since 2020. And the things that are outside of the system that, represent a form of money that the system can't mess with, Bitcoin and gold, have skyrocketed. I mean, since 2020, in bond terms, gold's up, 250%, and Bitcoin's up, 2,000%. I mean, it's insane. And so that's a signal that something is going on here. And, whether it's the people buying, gold bars at Costco, or the people going to the coin stores and buying coins, or, the blue collar workers that I've worked with, that I know who take all their savings and put it in silver coins. I mean, it's just kind of coming from everywhere. And, this awareness is it's growing and growing and growing. And yet, the average person isn't really tuned into it. And we're still, as Saylor says, this is the gold rush. We're still, I don't know where we are on the Malcolm Gladwell 10% tipping point. We all know the theory. You hit 10%, and then it's going to rapidly accelerate until you hit 90. The same time it got from 0 to 10 is the same time it goes from 10 to 90. Well, we're 16 years into Bitcoin. I don't think we're actually at 10 yet. I think we're maybe at 5, but we're growing. We're going there pretty quickly. And, to my way of seeing it, it's going to accelerate here in the next 5 or 10 years. And so I think we're all going to be stunned. I mean, I know as in the fund I manage, the things I watch, it's very easy to think, well, gosh, this has gone up a lot. And usually when you're investing and you have something that goes up a lot, you think maybe it's time to sell. And, but then I look at the bigger picture and the construction of what's going on, and I realize that no, if this is the fundamental shift that I think it is of growing awareness of everybody of the issue, then we don't sell until everybody's aware of the issue and it's no longer an issue. And that's, we're not there yet, not even close. So, as you and I've talked about in the past, I mean, I think gold's going to 10,000. I think Bitcoin's going to 1,000,000. I mean, and that's not that far out. I mean, within a 5 to 6 to 7 year window. So it grows in order of magnitude. I mean, so it went from 1 to 10, 10 to 100, 100 to 1,000, 1,000 to 10,000, 10,000 to 100,000. I mean, was that 6 or 7 orders of magnitude, and it's been around for 15 years. So now it was more rapid in the earlier years. But and that's slowing down, as Sailors pointed out. The ARR has come down, but it's gonna do another order of magnitude. And that's gonna do another order of magnitude after that. I mean, someday it's gonna go to 10 million. But that's probably quite some ways out, because it like I say, it is slowing down. But yeah, I mean, I remember very clearly back in the depths of the bull market or the bear market in gold, and things were down, and I don't know, this was 2016 or 17 or 18, and thinking to myself, boy, if this, and I owned a bunch of Bitcoin, thinking to myself, boy, if this ever got to 10, 20, 30,000, I'd be feeling pretty good about life. I was like at 4 at the time, and, then it went up and I got to 20. I was like, if this ever got to 100, I'd be feeling really good about life. And, and now it's at 100. And, yeah, the goalposts kind of keep moving, but it's a hard, I mean, I've said this before, it's a hard thing to get your head around. And I say that, I said this in another podcast. I think it's an important point to make. We have never had a form of money that would not be diluted in some form or fashion. There's never been such a thing. Even gold, 1.7% a year, every 45 years, the amount of gold on the planet doubles. 21 million, it's fixed. I think that fact right there explains why it can go up forever, because the supply is perfectly inelastic. And so, I think that fact right there is also why it's really hard for people to get their heads around it.
It's 2025, and Bitcoin has cemented itself as the best performing asset of the century, yet Wall Street advisors are still pretending it doesn't exist. It's 2025, yet many financial advisors and accountants continue to dismiss cryptocurrency, a stance that Lawrence Lepard argues is both outdated and negligent. With Bitcoin boasting a 16-year track record as the best-performing financial asset of the modern era, ignoring it is no longer a matter of skepticism but professional incompetence. Lepard stresses that Bitcoin's fixed supply of 21 million coins, coupled with rising global demand, leaves price as the only variable to adjust. This fundamental dynamic explains its extraordinary long-term appreciation and makes it increasingly impossible for serious investors to overlook. Beyond investment performance, Lepard points to growing recognition within U.S. strategic circles. Defense and intelligence officials, alongside the Treasury, are now studying hyperinflation as an existential threat and see Bitcoin as a potential solution. Historical precedent supports sudden monetary shifts, from Lincoln's greenbacks to Nixon's closure of the gold window, suggesting a U.S. president could one day announce a Bitcoin standard. Such a reset, Lepard argues, would devalue the dollar but simultaneously restore sound money, fiscal discipline, and financial stability. He even envisions Bitcoin being revalued to $1 million per coin, giving the U.S. a strategic advantage over global rivals. For Lepard, adopting Bitcoin is not just a hedge, it's the rational path forward. Let's get back to the interview.
If you believe that fact, if the demand just keeps on growing and the supply is fixed, the only thing left to change is price. Yeah, that's it. And by the way, and it's not, okay, so you could have said that a bunch of years ago, but you would have, the volatility and everything, say, am I right about it? But man, now you got 16 years of this shit. Do you know what I mean? And no financial asset. I mean, there's so many amazing things going on. How can you be a financial advisor of any kind, and not be pushing Bitcoin to your investors, or not even mention or poo-poo it when it is the best performing financial asset in the past 16 years. Not by a little bit, Danny, by an enormous amount.
You're just proving you're terrible at your job.
Yeah, right? How can you do that? I mean, I get it. If you didn't get it out earlier on, fine. If you're skeptical, fine. If you're still skeptical, fine. But at some point, the evidence, your lying eyes, the price, you just can't ignore it, right? Possibly. I just don't know. I think if America is smart, and I think there are some parts of America that are smart in our higher government echelons. An interesting thing, I don't know if I've told you, I don't think you and I had this discussion. So I was at Bitcoin Vegas, this last one, and guy came up to me. I can't dox him, and I can't tell you who he works for. He works for something very heavily associated with the defense and intelligence community of the United States. One of his prior employers was NSA. So I checked him out. He's a real deal. And I said, "What's going on?" He walked up to me and he tapped me. He said, "Hi, I really liked your book." I said, "Oh, thank you." He said, "Your book is burning up the halls of my, where I work."
Oh,
I said,
that's
"Where do you
cool.
work?" He explained. I'm not going to say what it was. And I said, "Why?" And I said, "That's interesting." He said, "Why?" He said, "Well, part of our job is to kind of look at every existential threat to the United States. And, hyperinflation is an existential threat. And, we're using your book as kind of a textbook to examine how and why hyperinflation is a risk and talk about our monetary, the monetary risk that exists within the United States. It's been very helpful." And I was like, wow, that's interesting. So you take that, you combine that with Jason Lowery's book, you combine that with, and Lowery telling my partner, David Foley, saying to him, "Hey, the people at the CIA, the DOD, the Pentagon, even high up in the Treasury, they get it. They understand that, the monetary threat here, and they get that Bitcoin is the solution. They're not stupid." Stephen Moran is a Bitcoiner. He said it. He had tweets supporting Bitcoin. They get it. Now, the Congress, the Senate, the executive branch, well, this one's a little better, but, they didn't get it at all. But these people understand that this is the superior form of sound money and therefore strategically important to the United States. So, I think there's a chance, and I don't know if Trump and Bessent will have the guts to do it before he leaves. I think some of it will depend on whether they think they're going to win the next election or not. I think if they go into the next election thinking, "Oh, no problem, JD's got it locked up, there's no chance of a loss," then they may not be forced to do it. But I think if it looks like they're losing ground and JD isn't going to win the next election, they might try a monetary reset right then, right there, and say, we're going to a Bitcoin standard, and which would involve a massive devaluation of the dollar, an enormous one-time inflation across the board, but then actually a solving of the problem of sound money and forcing the government to balance its budget. So, Bessent has said things like, "We need another Bretton Woods, and I want to be at the table when it happens." So, what? Holy shit. He kind of gets it. It's not, it's funny. These politicians, in some ways they're stupid, in some ways they're not. And, you can't really look at the $37 trillion of debt and not realize that that's a big elephant in the room, right? So, and the executive branch, there's a history of the executive branch doing monetary resets. The monetary policy in the United States is supposed to be set by Congress because it was said so in Article 1.8 of the Constitution. Only gold and silver money and monetary was congressional thing. Well, fine until, Lincoln printed greenbacks, executive order, right? FDR grabbed the gold, revalued it, executive order, right? Nixon broke us off the gold standard 71, executive order. So, there's this history that just says this, the president can change the monetary policy. So, what if they came out and said, "Guess what, guys, we're going to a Bitcoin standard. The new price of Bitcoin is $1 million a coin. We stand ready to buy it or sell it." The dollar obviously would depreciate enormously. And, we're going to match that with a balanced budget amendment. And off we go. And China and India are left there with their, their thumb in their butt going, "Oh, fuck, now what do we do?" That would be the smart thing to do. Now, will we do that, or will they have the political cover or the guts to do it? I don't know, probably not. But it's the right thing to do. That's what we should do. If you want to restore fairness, and at that point in time, we could go forward in a much, much better world, because all of this grift, all of this monetary nonsense would just go away. It just would. and the currency would be sound again.
Bitcoin's rise is proving to be far more than a passing trend. It is steadily becoming the backbone of a new financial era. With a fixed supply and unmatched performance, it continues to attract not only innovators but also a growing wave of imitators, each reinforcing its long-term trajectory. The shift from skepticism to recognition among institutions, governments, and everyday investors signals a deep transformation in global money. What was once dismissed as speculative is now shaping fiscal policy discussions and strategic planning. Missing out is no longer about caution, it's about risking irrelevance in the future of finance. If Bitcoin has outperformed every major asset for 16 years and adoption is still under 10%, can investors really afford to ignore it any longer? The next Bitcoin breakout is around the corner. Comment your take, share with your network, and subscribe to never miss a move.